Hello, hello. Welcome back. It's Leading Women in Tech Time. In a world that never sleeps, where deadlines loom and expectations are always increasing for us, we are living in a world of constant hustle. It is pervasive as part of our leadership culture. We do still live in a society that glorifies overwork, the hustle, the always-on mentality that rewards busy, 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 where there's little regard for mental health and physical well-being. Today, I want to dig into the cost of the hustle, the cost of constant hustle, and why if you want to do great things in your career, you shouldn't be doing it. It goes counter to so much of what we're told. So let's dig into why I am so passionate about this and why every single client I work with and every member of my team is told that hustle is never the solution. There is this need in society to perform, overperform, and it has made it incredibly challenging to do anything other than keep up with everything. As a leader, you may well feel this constant pressure to hustle, 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 be always on, always available, which does leave you vulnerable to burnout. But before we dig into that, just let me remind you, burnout is not caused by busy. Burnout is caused by stress. The problem is that quite a lot of the time, the hustle causes stress, but not always. We will come back to this in more detail later on. What we really need to be aware of, though, are the repercussions to our mental health. Our ability to perform our jobs effectively go hand in hand with how busy we are. Let me tell you, the cost of being busy, 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 and the well-being to us and our teams is just a price that isn't worth paying, as you'll see as we go through today's episode. So I want to dig into the myths around the culture of overwork and hustle. Why do we have this relentless pursuit of more? And we're going to talk about the cost of that, to its impact on you, the consequences on our leadership roles, the consequences on our organizations. So let's first unpack what is hustle culture. That is essentially a very common mentality of intense work, few breaks or downtime. You get kudos for being in the grind. Toxic productivity involves working hours beyond that 40-hour week. It involves taking work home, being in our personal time. It involves being available during our vacations because we're worried about if we're not, what happens to our job. And society has rewarded this. And I am on a mission alongside Elevating Women in Tech. I'm on a mission to change this. I think they have to be done together. Part of why I believe, I don't have data on this, but I've seen so much. I wish somebody would study this. Part of why I believe so many women leave tech before they really thrive in their leadership roles is because there is so much pervasive attitude of this always hustle, being deeply ingrained in our professional expectations. And when we are also the primary caregiver, that comes into so much conflict. The stress kicks in. In addition, we're not getting rewarded as much as men because, believe it or not, you don't actually get rewarded for hustling. And the unconscious bias means that men are more likely to be promoted than women, something I'm trying to change as well. And so if we don't address this always on, always hustling culture, we aren't going to address the gender gap. And the thing is, if we don't do that, we're actually not building good businesses either. And not just because of the diversity of having more women at the table, but because hustle doesn't equal good for business. More and more people are quietly speaking up. People are quitting. People are talking about their mental health and having a more work-life balance. This had its comeuppance, I would say, in two ways during COVID. We had a lot of people talking about work-life balance being necessary, but then we also had people struggling with the boundaries when they were working from home. Many of us have finally begun to view hustle culture as a societal problem, which it is. It's not a way to climb the ranks. It is a problem where we somehow think working long hours is equivalent to success, and it really is not. As you're going to hear as we go through today's episode, actually the cost of this is that it's less good for business, even though we feel busy. But society, the professional world, has perpetuated this myth that relentless hustle and stress are linked to success. There's a belief that one must be constantly moving faster, more productive to stay competitive. It's so ingrained in our culture. We glorify busyness. We have this relentless productivity as a source of pride. How many people do you know who are proud of how long they work? They will tell you, I work this many hours this week. There's a little bit of like, I work this many hours this week. There's a little bit of I work this many hours this week. Aren't I awesome? And look how you should be excited for me. Look how amazing I am because I did that, because I sacrificed something else to do that. And we're trapped in this shared delusion that the only way to have success and reward is with this significant cost of hustle, where the hustling leader feels compelled to continuously outpace the competition, which means we're all in a self-perpetual cycle of burnout. I've worked with women who have gone through several cycles of hustle, burnout, hustle, burnout, hustle, burnout before they come to me. And they're not seeing what's really going on, which is, we need to break this. They're just saying, I have no other choice. You do have another choice. We're going to get to that too. And what we need to really understand is that the mislabeling rest, rejuvenation, taking care of ourselves as a reward rather than a biological imperative for optimal performance is part of the problem. It's only really in the last decade, I would say, that it's been acceptable to ask for 8 hours or more sleep a night. I personally am an 8.5 hour sleep a night kind of girl. My husband's a 9, right? I think sleep is a beautiful thing. Finally, society is saying sleep is important, but there's still a very large portion of society which says if you sleep more than 5 or 6 hours, if you don't get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, you're somehow not good enough. Rest as an attribute is viewed as something that you don't need. But here's the thing. It isn't a luxury. It is what allows you to do great work. When we dismiss the importance of downtime, when we don't prioritize self-care, when we aren't leveraging rest and replenishment, our competence diminishes. Our IQ actually goes down. Your IQ can be demonstrated to go down. You will make less good decisions. You will struggle to make decisions, and the decisions you do make will be less good. The myth that rest is an indulgence needs to be stopped. This is actually the thing that's going to improve our productivity, rather than rest being the opposite of productivity. But also, let's talk about multitasking for a moment here. The myth that multitasking is fundamental for efficiency and success is, again, deeply rooted in our hustle culture. And I've known so many women who will tell me, women are great at multitasking. That's part of why we're better than men. And I'm like, no human is good at multitasking. What many women are able to do is context switch really, really well, because we've learned how to project manage our own lives and those of the people around us. Women, on average, in the Western culture, are more likely to project manage their households, figuring out who needs to be where, when, who's going to get the groceries, who's going to do the cleaning, who's going to book the car in for a service, whatever it is. We are likely to take on more of that, which means that we've had to get really good at context switching really fast. And that gives the impression of multitasking. But here's the thing. Multitasking is just terrible for anything other than the most trivial stuff. Sure enough, I multitask if I'm on a call to the bank, right? And I know I'm going to be on for an hour and not a lot's going to happen. I will do something else. I'll be like skimming my emails or something like that. But I don't do my emails very well. I will never take on a difficult task. Multitasking stops you doing everything else well, because what you're actually doing is juggling tasks rather than doing one thing well and getting it done. But there is this expectation that multitasking, fast-paced work environments is synonymous with competence. But research indicates that multitasking leads to forgetfulness, decreased efficiency, and just basically your ability to be an effective leader goes down. And again, this is a harmful narrative that we have to stop, because it's prioritizing quantity over quality. Honestly, one of the things I find fascinating is now I've really let go of multitasking being a thing. I find that I multitask when I'm tired, when I've not had enough sleep. It's like I fall into this trap of not being able to focus. And so I'm multitasking. That tells me everything I need to know. When I can't focus, I multitask because I get bored, because my brain's like, no, you don't want to do that. And to me, that speaks volumes about what actually happens when we multitask. We don't focus. We don't do anything well. We are focused on quantity over quality. And actually, I would argue the quantity actually goes down. We just don't think it because we're busy. And so, although the hustle culture in society does promote hard work and reaching goals, which I'm not opposed to. I believe in working hard, but not long. I believe being really focused and having deep work and reaching those goals. I just do not believe you need to be doing 100 things at once or working crazy hours. In fact, I believe that's bad. What we need to do is really just let go of this obsession with crazy hours. One study in 2022, which involved over 2,000 employees and executives, showed how bad this culture is now becoming a detriment to how we think and operate. 70% of C-level executives in this study said they were considering quitting their jobs for ones that better supported their well-being. 40% felt exhausted, stressed, and overwhelmed. 30% of executives felt lonely, and well over 50% of all employees and executives experienced fatigue and mental health issues. We are a hustle crisis. And the thing is, that is a lot of talent that really should not be out of work while they can recover from burnout. I don't know what the average time for recovering from burnout is, but I've known so many people over the years who've taken 6 or 12 months off to deal with burnout and stress. That's a long time for somebody who has a lot of knowledge. You think executives, they get up there because they know a lot. They have a lot to give and a lot to offer. That's a very long time for that talent to not be in the workforce. Not to mention, none of us should want turnover in our companies, not unless it's a deliberate decision for new, fresh ideas, at which point burning out our teams is a terrible idea. So even though as leaders, we all want to accomplish more, we want to achieve more, we want our teams to deliver more, and so many of us believe hustling is the thing that will get us and our teams there, I want you to understand that hustling that doesn't allow for downtime, doesn't allow for personal time, doesn't allow you time with family and friends, the stuff that recharges you, even if you're an introvert, by the way, or anything else that's limiting our ability to work on our mental health and well-being, that will lead to burnout. Because although burnout is caused by stress and working longer hours is not necessarily equal to stress, feeling that you don't have time for the things that rejuvenate you, feeling that you don't have time for friends and family. And even if you're not a friends and family kind of person, like you're quite antisocial, you actually still need contact with people outside of work. And I struggle with this one. Like I would work all the time. I love what I do. But there's having that personal time, that human connection in your personal time that is really, really important. And if you don't have that, it does cause stress. If you aren't sleeping, that's a form of stress. If your health is suffering, that's a form of stress. If you aren't able to get to your kids' recital, well, that's stress. If you're not able to have time with your family, your partner, or anybody else, that's stress. And when we have stress, we have burnout. Working long hours is not burnout. Stress is burnout. To keep saying that, because I wouldn't have a problem with this if it was just long hours. It's the cost of the long hours that's the real problem. So let's now talk about the signs and symptoms of burnout in our leadership. Leaders often experience burnout because they are persistently exhausted, persistently fatigued, physically and emotionally. They have high levels of pressure to perform at a high level, deliver at a high level, which leads to a profound sense of tiredness that often doesn't go with rest, partly because the rest isn't good quality and you're stressed about what you're expected to deliver. This all adds up to a depletion of energy, which impacts our performance, impacts our ability to make decisions. We make slower decisions, we make less good decisions. It spills into our personal lives, impacts our overall well-being, and we end up in a negative downward spiral. Ultimately, the cognitive impact of chronic stress and overwhelm means decreased concentration, attention. As I said, decision-making abilities go out the window. You're going to find you struggle to meet deadlines. If you do, you don't do as well. You're not making good strategic choices. Your team will see this as pivoting and flip-flopping and all that kind of stuff. Usual signs of productivity, you may feel that you're doing well because you're working crazy, but actually somebody measuring it would see a decline in the overperformance. You will feel it because you feel you're underperforming, or you feel like there's more pressure coming from above to perform, when actually there might not be. Sometimes there is, but there might not be. It might be that you unconsciously know you're not delivering despite working crazy hours. And when we're dealing with this, we often have this massive sense of cynicism and detachment. We can become emotionally distant from our team members, our organizational goals. We become more defensive. A common one with burnout is our defensiveness goes up. Every human gets defensive, by the way, every single one of us. It's just we want to work on being less defensive because it never solves problems. But you will find with stress and burnout, you are more defensive. You're feeling more overwhelmed. You disengage from work stuff. You have a diminishing sense of a connection with everybody you work with. And all that contributes to more stress, which adds more irritability, more impatience, more need to work more hours. It negatively impacts on your relationships with those around you. You get frustrated with small things. You have a shorter fuse, personally and professionally, which means all your relationships suffer. You're angry and annoyed with everybody, which guess what? You then think, oh my God, like everything's going wrong. Burnout increases. Decision-making goes up. You just see here. This is like a cycle that you enter into of chronic stress. And I mean, so much comes with that. Sleep problems, insomnia, a lot of people with IBS, that can improve if you work on this stuff. It doesn't go away. I'm not necessarily saying that, although for some people it does. A lot of health stuff can clear up when we start taking care of ourselves. And it's just so heartbreaking. I've seen this so many times. A particular client of mine comes to mind. She came to me, having been working 60 hours a week, which I know for many of you is not unusual, spending all her time dealing with emergencies. Everything felt like firefighting. And she was feeling that she failed because she was struggling to get her and her team to meet KPIs. Every month, every quarter was getting worse and worse. But the problem was the culture. There was an always available culture, an always on culture. She needed to deal with emergencies like that. There was no time for strategic work, which meant she wasn't making good decisions. She also wasn't able to do the work that reduced the frequency of emergencies. There was no time to step back, get out of the hustle and busy, and avoid those emergencies in the first place. That takes strategic work. It doesn't just miraculously happen. Decisions across the business were poor because everyone around her was operating this way, which meant that projects were behind schedule. There was a fear of letting clients down, and it snowballed really, really quickly. This client story is so common, but it's this self-perpetuating cycle of poor decisions, poor quality work, and then even more hustle, which is so common across the corporate world. Burnout hits leadership hard. It perpetuates. One person being burnt out, others start feeling that way. When leaders face too much pressure, they pass it on. I always say to my clients, you need to be the umbrella that stops the shit, excuse my language, trickling down. And if you are burnt out, you will pass it down. Stress from impossible situations, impossible expectations, means that you have zero ability to make good decisions anymore. Burnout clouds our thinking. It clouds our problem-solving abilities. Our communication deteriorates, which means we are more irritable, impatient, detached from our team. Our relationships with our peers deteriorate, our bosses. This just spreads throughout an entire work environment. But the good thing is there are things you can do to prevent and mitigate this hustle burnout. These things are hard to do, not because they're hard, but because you're going to have a lot of resistance to it. That's why I've spent so much effort building the case for why you have to deal with this. It is bad for your career. It is bad for business. Working fewer hours increases productivity. I know it never feels like that. If I just do one more thing on my to-do list, stay an extra 30 minutes, surely I'll be further ahead tomorrow. The problem is it's cumulative and it builds up over time. And so what we need to do is realize we are never going to be done on our to-do list. And we're always going to be asked for more than we have time to do. We have to instead focus on self-care, maintaining our resilience and preventing burnout, bringing ourselves joy, seeking support, bringing in breaks, and having really strong boundaries about how many hours we work. Because without that, you will be less good at your job. There's a really good reason why some of the highest performers in the world don't actually work crazy hours. They aren't always on and always available. There are very few companies where I would say not responding for something for 12 hours as CEO is going to make or break the business. Very, very few. And so my view is actually things like phone calls at night should be an absolute emergency, which should happen once in a blue moon. Like seriously, once every few years, if that. So let's start talking about what can we do about this. One crucial aspect is goal setting, realistic goal setting. It's about looking at your workload. It's about pushing back. It's about when you're agreeing KPIs saying, that's not realistic. I'm the expert in this field as the leader. Believe me, that can't happen. It's about learning from previous quarters' mistakes. Most of us think we can do more than we can. Every time that happens, you need to go, oh, we're going to double it next time. You need to avoid the trap of overcommitting. You need to avoid the trap of always saying yes. It's about setting achievable objectives. Leaders can reduce the risk of overwhelming themselves and their teams, have healthier and more sustainable work environments simply by looking at goals. One of the most powerful things I've learned is to, instead of have an increase in the time scale or the number of hours it's going to take to do something as you get more information about how big a problem is say, let's reduce the scope of the problem we're addressing. So you never allow that time creep in, you reduce the scope. Most people always have the time creep and then there's more and more pressure. We're behind schedule. What if you just reduce the scope and said, it's such a simple shift because it may well mean that your next thing is the follow-on that you were hoping to do in this one. So it might not change things very much except semantically, but it changes our mindsets fundamentally. The next thing is delegation. I hope you know how important delegation is if you've listened to this podcast. I talk about it on a daily basis in my programs. Delegation is one of the most important tools for leaders to combat burnout. You should not be making all decisions yourself. You should trust your team. You should delegate workloads. You should delegate outcomes. You should delegate decisions. There should be a sense of collaboration. There should be a sense of being behind each other. There should be a sense of nobody's in the hustle trap. And then the next one, which I've already hinted at, is having really healthy work boundaries. Boundaries around when you're available, boundaries around when you work and when you relax, boundaries between workspaces. I have a little home office. I shut the door, I'm done. I do work on the sofa on my laptop, but only within my work hours. Boundaries around who you give your phone number to. If you give your phone number to somebody, it's your personal phone. They have to be somebody you completely trust to only use it in an emergency. Boundaries around even during your workday when you're available to be super responsive. Otherwise, you don't have time for deep work. Boundaries around when you recharge. Boundaries around your vacations. Boundaries. They are so incredibly important, and yet so many of us have very fuzzy boundaries. Interestingly, with me, I found late last year when I lost my dad, my boundaries just went. That was not something I was expecting. It's almost like with the stress of losing my father, my boundaries just kind of went fuzzy and whooshy because they do take some cognitive effort to hold. And it's fascinating because it then enters a spiral of I was stressed because I lost a dear member of my family. I was dealing with my family going through this loss. I felt like I was letting my team down, my clients down. Logically, I knew I wasn't. They were all so amazing about it. But then my boundaries got worse, which meant I wasn't recuperating and recovering. I wasn't doing the self-care. And I was like, oh, wait, hold on. And so I had a fabulous 2-week break at Christmas to reset myself. And then I actually needed to take some more time just early this year because I still wasn't fully recovered. And now my boundaries are back in place. So have clear rules about your boundaries. Have clear rules around how work is managed. Even if you have flexible schedules. My team has a very flexible work-life balance. But at the same time, I say, but you have to have boundaries. Make sure that you're adhering to mental health best practice. Look at counseling, look at mentorship programs, look at coaching, of course. Learn from people inside the company who aren't working crazy. How do they manage it? Okay, there's so much more I could talk about here, but if nothing else, I want you to know that being in the always hustle mode as a leader is not good for you. It's not good for your career. It's not good for your company. Even if everybody else in your company does it and you think, I can't do anything else, believe me, it is not a good idea. I hope you really heard that message. Tackling it, what I've said is very straightforward sounding. I know that implementing it can be hard. There's a lot of objections. There's a lot of politics. There's a lot of executive presence that goes into changing the way you're operating at work, changing expectations about your availability, changing when you're going to manage things in your calendar in particular ways. But I want you to look out for signs of exhaustion, signs of emotional detachment. Look at yourself and say, am I on the verge of burnout? Am I there? Do I work crazy hours? Am I tempted to work crazy hours? And I want you to really prioritize looking at what you can do. Look at having some breaks. Look at some joyful activities. Look at effective delegation to prevent those overwhelming workloads. Have those boundaries in place. And please, if you need help, reach out to me and my team. Even just a quick chat might be the game changer you need to change things. And let's not have you in that burnout cycle ever again. I encourage you to take action, and I would encourage you to come and share that. This is a hard one. Stepping away from the hustle culture is a paradigm shift in the corporate world. And if we're going to do that, we have to do it together. So if you are trying this, I would love for you to share. We do have a community on the Leading Women in Tech Slack workspace. Link is in the show notes. Please come along and let me know. What are you trying? How are you feeling about it? How are you tackling your busy and your burnout problems? Come and talk to us in Lift Up Leadership Academy as well. One of my main programs where we talk about this on a daily basis. Let me know how you get on. Until next time, remember, stay in your tech leadership game. Follow your dreams, because the world really does need that uniqueness that you bring as a leading woman in tech.